When both engines die at 35,000 feet over the Rockies, a woman in scrubs stands up. I was an Air Force pilot. She takes the controls, radios her call sign to military jets. They respond in shock. That call sign belonged to a pilot declared dead 7 years ago. Now she must land 312 passengers or die trying. Again. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The engines of United Flight 1547 died at 2:47 p.m., 35,000 feet above the Rocky Mountains. Captain David Reynolds felt the vibration, a shudder through the yoke. Then silence. The wrong kind of silence. Bird strike. First Officer Michelle Park shouted. Both engines, dual flame out. Through the windscreen, Reynolds saw the geese scattering. Too late. Both engines had ingested multiple birds. Denver Center, United 1547, declaring emergency, Reynolds transmitted. Dual engine failure, we are going down. United 1547, nearest airport is Denver International, bearing 120, 93 miles. Reynolds looked at Park. They both knew. We won't make it, Park whispered. Try the restart checklist, Reynolds ordered, knowing it was futile. The engines were gone. 312 passengers, and nowhere to land but mountains. In the cabin, panic spread. Then, from seat 22C, a woman stood. She wore scrubs under a cardigan. She'd been silent the entire flight. Now she moved forward with purpose. The woman kept walking. I was an Air Force pilot. I can help. The flight attendant, Marcus, 20 years of service, stopped. Something in her eyes made him believe her. What's your name? The woman hesitated. Pain crossed her face. It's complicated. But I can fly this plane. Get me to the cockpit. Now. Marcus gave the emergency code. The door cracked open. Captain, there's a woman who says she's a pilot. The woman pushed past into the cockpit. She looked at the dead engines, the altitude indicator, the terrain map showing only mountains. You can't glide to Denver, she said. Not from here, not over this terrain. The woman slid into the jump seat, reaching for the radio headset. Denver Center, this is United 1547. Be advised, I'm taking aircraft control. Call sign survivor. Silence on the radio. Then, United 1547, say again your call sign. Survivor. I have the aircraft. In Colorado Springs, Air Force Colonel Jessica Grant nearly dropped her coffee when she heard that call sign. Impossible. Get me the F-22s. Now. 2 F-22 Raptors diverted immediately, racing toward the stricken airliner. United 1547, this is Blade 1, we have you visual. Confirm your call sign. Sarah keyed the mic. Blade 1, call sign survivor. Captain Sarah Mitchell. Yes, that's Sarah Mitchell. Captain Mitchell was declared dead 7 years ago. I didn't die. I just stopped existing. Reynolds and Park stared at her. You're the pilot from the Alaska crash, Park breathed. They said you died too. I did, Sarah said. Just not the way they think. Now let me help you save these people, or we can talk while we fall out of the sky. Reynolds looked at his altimeter. 28,000 feet and dropping. Aircraft is yours. Sarah Mitchell put her hands on the yoke for the first time in 7 years. The Raptors flanked the airliner as Sarah ran calculations. Altitude, weight, glide ratio, wind, terrain. The numbers weren't good. We need a highway, she said. Interstate 70. There's a straight section near Idaho Springs. 2 miles of clear asphalt. That's 64 miles from here, Reynolds said. Can we make it? Sarah felt the aircraft, sensing its weight, its willingness to glide. Maybe, she said. If I can hold optimal glide speed. If the winds cooperate. If we're lucky. And if we're not? Then we hit a mountain and everyone dies. In the cabin, passengers had their phones out. Someone had recognized Sarah from old news reports. That's Captain Sarah Mitchell, a man in row 18 hissed to his wife. She disappeared 7 years ago after a crash in Alaska killed her husband and daughter. Everyone assumed she died too. What's she doing here? Some say she faked her death. Her daughter died in her arms. The trauma was too much. The whispers spread. Some passengers looked toward the cockpit with hope. Others with superstition. In the cockpit, Sarah focused on the horizon. The mountains stretched out, peaks like teeth. But she could see the gap where the highway cut through. 64 miles. 23,000 feet, dropping at 800 feet per minute. The math was tight. I need to adjust our glide path, Sarah said. We're too steep. She adjusted, trading altitude for distance. The descent rate slowed. But every correction cost precious altitude. United 1547, this is Blade 1. You're not going to make Idaho Springs. Sarah's jaw tightened. I'll make it. Captain Mitchell. I'll make it. But the memories came flooding back. 7 years ago. Alaska. The de Havilland Beaver Bush plane had been cruising at 6,000 feet when the engine coughed. No warning, no gauge fluctuation, just a sudden loss of power that sent them spiraling toward the wilderness below. Sarah remembered her husband Jake's voice, calm even as death reached up for them, I can't restart it. Brace for impact. She remembered turning around in the co-pilot seat, seeing Emma's face. 8 years old, big brown eyes wide with trust. No fear. She believed Mommy and Daddy would save her. The impact shattered that belief along with the aircraft. Jake died instantly when the engine crushed backward into the cockpit. Sarah's shoulder broke, 3 ribs cracked, but she was alive. She smelled fuel, knew she had minutes to get Emma out before the plane caught fire or the cold killed them both. Emma was trapped in the back, her legs pinned by twisted metal. Sarah pulled her free, ignoring her own broken body, dragging her daughter out into the snow. They were alone. The emergency beacon was destroyed. No one knew where they'd gone down. The Alaska wilderness stretched out in every direction, white and deadly and infinite. Sarah held Emma close, trying to share her body heat. But hypothermia doesn't negotiate. It takes what it wants. Mommy, I'm cold, Emma whispered. I know, baby. Stay with me. Stay awake. I'm trying. I know you are, sweetheart. You're so brave. 3 hours later, Emma's lips were blue. Her breathing was shallow. Sarah knew. She'd trained for this. She knew what was happening and she was powerless to stop it. Will you fly again, Mommy? Emma whispered. Sarah's heart broke. I'll never fly without you, baby. Never. Promise me, promise you'll fly. I promise, Emma. I promise. Emma died 20 minutes later. Sarah held her daughter's body as the sun set and the temperature dropped and the world became nothing but ice and darkness and unbearable loss. She should have died too. Hypothermia should have taken her. But some cruel cosmic joke kept her alive. 3 days she survived in that wilderness, half mad with grief, before a search plane finally spotted the wreckage. The rescuers found Jake's body. They found the plane. They found Sarah, barely conscious, clutching her daughter's frozen corpse. I'm the only survivor, Sarah told them, her voice hollow. Everyone else is dead. They airlifted her out. She attended the funeral. Saw the double casket, Jake and Emma buried together. Stood in her dress blues while the honor guard played taps. Then she walked away from the cemetery and never came back. She withdrew her savings. Created a new identity, became Jane Summers, a traveling nurse. Let the world think Sarah Mitchell had died in the wilderness with her family. It was easier that way. Easier than explaining that she'd broken her promise to her daughter. That she'd sworn never to fly again and she'd meant it. That the weight of Emma's death was too much to carry while the world watched. 7 years. 7 years of running. 7 years of hiding. Until United Flight 1547's engines failed and forced her to choose, stay hidden or save 312 lives. Present. Captain Mitchell, are you with us? Sarah blinked. Reynolds was staring at her. She'd zoned out for just a moment, but a moment was all it took to lose altitude they couldn't afford. I'm here, she said. What's our altitude? 18,000. Distance to Idaho Springs, 42 miles. Sarah ran the numbers. Too steep. They were still dropping too fast. I need to extend our glide, she said. We're going to have to fly a shallower approach. It'll eat up more distance but it's our only shot. You're the pilot, Reynolds said. And the way he said it, with complete trust, made Sarah's throat tighten. She adjusted their flight path, pulling back incrementally, feeling the aircraft respond. Behind her, she could hear the passenger cabin. The muffled sounds of crying, praying. Some people shouting at each other. They know who you are, Park said quietly. The passengers. They've been looking you up. Some of them think you're going to save them. Others think you're cursed. That we're all doomed because you're here. Sarah laughed. It was a bitter sound. Maybe they're right. Everyone close to me dies. You're still here. Am I? Sarah met Park's eyes. Or did I die 7 years ago and just forgot to stop breathing? Before Park could respond, the radio crackled. United 1547, this is Colonel Jessica Grant, U.S. Air Force. Sarah, is that really you? Sarah's hands tightened on the yoke. Jessica. Her best friend. Her squadron mate. The person she'd abandoned without explanation 7 years ago. It's me, Jess, Sarah said softly. Where the hell have you been? Hiding. For 7 years. It wasn't long enough. There was a pause. Sarah could imagine Jessica in the operations center, struggling with 1,000 emotions. Anger, relief, confusion. Can you land this plane? Jessica asked finally. I don't know, Sarah admitted. But I'm going to try. For Emma. Emma's dead, Sarah. I know. But I promised her I'd fly again. I broke that promise for 7 years. I'm not breaking it today. The mountains below seemed to reach up for them, hungry. At 15,000 feet, Sarah could see the highway clearly now. Interstate 70 snaked through the mountains like a gray ribbon, but the section she needed, the long straight stretch near Idaho Springs, was still 30 miles away. The numbers weren't working. We're not going to make it to Idaho Springs, Reynolds said, reading the same calculations Sarah was running in her head. I know. So what do we do? Sarah scanned the terrain below, her mind working. There, about 8 miles ahead, she could see another section of highway. Shorter than Idaho Springs, maybe 1.5 miles, but straighter, less traffic. There, she pointed. Highway 6. Runs parallel to the creek. It's our best shot. That's not long enough for this aircraft, Park protested. It'll have to be. Sarah adjusted their approach, lining up with the highway. Through the cockpit windows, she could see cars below. Tiny moving dots oblivious to the fact that a dead airliner was about to drop out of the sky onto their road. Blade 1, I need you to clear that highway, Sarah transmitted. Buzz it. Low and loud. Get those cars out of the way. Roger that, Survivor. The 2 F-22s broke formation, diving toward the highway with a thunder that shook windows for miles. Cars swerved, drivers looked up in shock and confusion, then saw the massive passenger jet gliding silently toward them and understood. Panic ensued. Vehicles careened off the road, pulled onto shoulders, some drivers just abandoning their cars and running. Within 90 seconds, 1.5 miles of Highway 6 was clear. Highway's clear, Survivor. You're set. Copy, Blade 1. Thanks for the assist. Sarah focused on her approach. Airspeed 180 knots, altitude dropping through 12,000 feet. Distance to touchdown point, 6 miles. In the cabin, flight attendants had everyone in brace position. The passengers who thought Sarah was cursed were praying. The ones who believed in her were praying too. At this point, everyone was praying. Marcus, the senior flight attendant, made his way to the cockpit one last time. "Captain Mitchell," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know, whatever happened to you before, whatever you've been running from, you came back when it mattered. That counts for something." Sarah didn't take her eyes off the approaching highway, but she nodded. "Tell everyone to hold tight. This is going to be rough." Marcus went back to his station. Sarah heard him on the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Mitchell has the aircraft. Brace for landing. Brace, brace, brace. 10,000 feet. 4 miles out." Sarah extended the flaps manually. Without engine power, the hydraulic systems were running on backup only, but she could still get partial flap extension. Every bit of drag control helped. 8,000 feet. 3 miles. She could see individual trees now. Individual rocks. The highway looked impossibly narrow from up here, a pencil line that couldn't possibly accommodate a Boeing 737. 6,000 feet. 2 miles. "Gear down," Sarah ordered. Park hesitated. "Without hydraulic pressure, we won't get the uplock override. We don't need it. Gear down, now." Park hit the gear lever. Nothing happened. Then, slowly, the gear began to extend under gravity alone. The nose gear dropped. The main gear dropped. 3 green lights on the panel. "Gear down and locked," Park confirmed, her voice shaking. 4,000 feet. 1 mile. Sarah could see people on the ground now, crowds gathering on the hillsides to watch the impossible landing. News helicopters were already circling. This was going to be on every screen in the world within minutes. 2,000 feet, half a mile. The highway filled her windscreen. She could see the painted lines, the guardrails, the asphalt seams. Too narrow. Way too narrow. But it was all they had. 1,000 feet, quarter mile. Sarah's hands were steady on the yoke. She thought of Emma. Pictured her daughter's face. Heard her voice, "Will you fly again, Mommy?" "I'm flying, baby," Sarah whispered. "I'm flying." 500 feet. The ground rushed up to meet them. "Brace!" Sarah shouted. The main gear touched down on the highway at 140 knots, rubber screaming, the entire aircraft shuddering with the impact. Sarah stood on the brakes, feeling them grab, feeling the aircraft slow. But not fast enough. They were eating up the highway, the end of the clear section approaching fast. Sarah could see abandoned cars ahead, a curve in the road, a bridge. She had seconds to stop. Reynolds and Park both had their feet on the rudder pedals, fighting to keep the aircraft centered on the narrow highway. The wings cleared the guardrails by inches on each side. The brakes were cooking now, smoking, but they were working. The aircraft was slowing. 100 knots. 80 knots. 60 knots. The end of the clear section was 50 yards ahead. 40 knots. 25 yards. 20 knots. 10 yards. The aircraft shuddered to a stop with the nose gear 15 feet from an abandoned Honda Civic. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the cabin erupted in screams, not of terror this time, but of relief, joy, disbelief. 312 people who'd been certain they were going to die were suddenly, impossibly alive. In the cockpit, Sarah sat frozen. Her hands were still on the yoke. Her eyes were still locked forward. "We're down," Reynolds said, his voice stunned. "We're down and we're alive. All of us." Park was crying, laughing, shaking. "You did it. You actually did it." Sarah let go of the yoke. Her hands were trembling. She looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. Then something inside her broke. A sound came out of her, part sob, part scream, part prayer. 7 years of grief came pouring out all at once, unstoppable, overwhelming. "I saved them, Emma," she gasped. "Mommy saved them this time. I saved them." She collapsed forward, her body racked with sobs, repeating her daughter's name over and over. Reynolds and Park could only watch, helpless, as this woman who just performed a miracle came apart before their eyes. Outside, emergency vehicles were already swarming the aircraft. Paramedics rushed aboard. Passengers were being evacuated down the emergency slides. They found Sarah in the cockpit, catatonic, still repeating "Emma, Emma, Emma," like a prayer or a curse or both. The medics had to carry her out. The video went viral within an hour. Someone on the ground had filmed the entire landing, the massive passenger jet gliding silently out of the sky, touching down on the highway, the smoke from the brakes, the impossible stop just feet from disaster. But it was the interview with passengers that made the story explode. "That pilot saved us," a woman said to the news cameras, tears streaming down her face. "Captain Mitchell. She's a hero." "Captain Sarah Mitchell?" the reporter asked. "The Air Force pilot who disappeared 7 years ago?" "Yes. She was on our plane. She took control when the engines failed. She landed us on a highway. She saved 312 lives." The reporter's eyes widened. This was the story of the century. Within hours, every news outlet in the world was running with it. The ghost pilot, the woman who died and came back, the mother who lost her child and saved everyone else's children. Sarah woke up in a hospital room with Jessica Grant sitting beside her bed. "Hey, stranger," Jessica said softly. Sarah stared at her former best friend. Jessica looked older. 7 years would do that. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Gray in her hair. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "For what?" "Saving 300 people. Pulling off a miracle landing. For disappearing, for not saying goodbye. For letting you think I was dead." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you do it, Sarah? Why did you run?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because Emma died in my arms and I couldn't save her. Because I broke my promise to her. Because being Sarah Mitchell meant being the mother who let her daughter die, and I couldn't live with that. So I became someone else. Jane Summers. A nurse, someone who saved people instead of losing them. You didn't let Emma die. The crash. I was the pilot, Jess. I chose to fly that route. I made the decisions that put us in that plane on that day. And when it crashed, I couldn't pull her free fast enough. I couldn't keep her warm. I couldn't save her. So you punished yourself for 7 years. It wasn't punishment. It was survival. Being Jane meant I didn't have to wake up every day and look at Emma's empty room. Didn't have to answer questions about why I couldn't save my own daughter. Didn't have to see the pity in everyone's eyes." Jessica reached out, took Sarah's hand. "What happened on that plane today, United 1547? That wasn't Jane Summers. That was Captain Sarah Mitchell. Whether you like it or not, she came back." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened. A man walked in, and Sarah's world stopped. Jake's brother. No, not Jake. Jake was dead. This was David. But he looked so much like Jake it hurt to breathe. Sarah, David said. His voice was controlled, but there was rage underneath. Cold, burning rage. David, You let me bury an empty casket, he said quietly. You let me plan a funeral for you. You let me cry over your grave. You let me believe you were dead. I'm sorry. You're sorry. David's control cracked. I lost my brother and my niece in that crash. And I thought I lost you too. I mourned you, Sarah. I spent 7 years mourning you. And all that time, you were alive. You were out there somewhere, living under a fake name, and you couldn't even call to tell me you were okay. I wasn't okay, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I've never been okay. Emma died, David. Your niece died in my arms and I couldn't save her. Every breath I took after that felt like a betrayal. How could I call you? How could I face you? You lost a niece but I lost my baby girl. So you faked your death. I didn't fake it. I just didn't correct people when they assumed. The rescuers found me half dead. They found Jake's body and Emma's body and they assumed I wouldn't survive either. When I walked out of that hospital, it was easier to just disappear. To let Sarah Mitchell die with her family. David stared at her. I remarried, you know. 2 years after you died. I have a son now. He's 4 years old. Sarah flinched. I'm glad. You deserve happiness. Do you know what I'm going to tell him when he asks about his Aunt Sarah? The one in the photo albums, the one who supposedly died. Tell him the truth. That she did die. That the woman who survived the crash wasn't Sarah Mitchell anymore. David shook his head. The whole world knows you're alive now. That landing is on every screen on the planet. You can't hide anymore. I know. The authorities are going to want answers. You faked your death. There are laws against that. I know that too. David looked at her for a long moment. Despite his anger, there was something else in his eyes. Something that might have been relief. 312 people are alive because of you, he said finally. Jake would be proud of that. Then he turned and walked out. Sarah sat in the hospital bed, feeling the weight of the world settling back onto her shoulders. She'd saved all those people. But the cost was her anonymity. Her escape. Her 7 years of peace. Jane Summers was dead now. Sarah Mitchell was back. Whether she wanted to be or not. The charges came down 3 weeks later: fraud, identity falsification, insurance evasion, obstruction of justice. The federal prosecutor was making an example of her. You can't fake your death and walk away. But the prosecutor hadn't counted on 312 witnesses for the defense. The courtroom was packed. Passengers from United 1547 filled every available seat. More stood outside, holding signs. Captain Mitchell saved my life. Hero, not criminal, 312 reasons to show mercy. Sarah sat at the defense table in a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back, looking smaller than she had in the cockpit. Her lawyer, a public defender named Thomas Chen, was young but fierce. Your Honor, Chen began. My client is not denying that she assumed a new identity. She's not denying that she allowed people to believe she had died. But she is asking this court to consider the context. The unbearable grief that drove her to that decision. And the fact that she came out of hiding when lives were at stake. The prosecutor, a severe woman named Alice Bradshaw, wasn't buying it. Grief is not a license to break the law. Captain Mitchell committed fraud. She collected death benefits under false pretenses. She collected nothing, Chen interrupted. She withdrew her own money from her own accounts and left. She didn't file an insurance claim. She didn't take a penny that wasn't hers. She abandoned her responsibilities. What responsibilities? Chen's voice rose. Her daughter was dead. Her husband was dead. She had no minor children to care for, no dependents who needed her. She was a widow who couldn't cope with her loss, so she started over. That's not a crime. That's human. Bradshaw pulled out a photo. Projected it on the screen for the jury. It showed Sarah in her Air Force uniform, Jake beside her, Emma between them. All of them smiling. This woman, Bradshaw said, pointing at Sarah, had a duty to her community. To her squadron. To the people who cared about her. She violated that duty when she chose to disappear. Objection, Chen said. Emotional duty is not legal duty. Sustained, the judge said. Ms. Bradshaw, please focus on the actual charges. But the damage was done. The jury was looking at the photo. Looking at Emma's bright smile. Looking at Sarah, who sat frozen, staring at her daughter's face like it was the first time she'd seen it in 7 years. When it was time for witnesses, the passengers from United 1547 lined up. A mother with 2 children, Captain Mitchell saved my babies. Whatever she did before, she made up for it that day. An elderly man, I prayed for a miracle when those engines failed. God sent me Captain Mitchell. A businessman, I don't care about the legal technicalities. That woman is a hero. One after another, they testified. Not about the charges, not about the law, but about the moment when a stranger stood up in the cabin and said, I can help, and then proceeded to save their lives. When the prosecution tried to object that this wasn't relevant to the charges, Chen had an answer. Your Honor, the defense's position is that Captain Mitchell spent 7 years in self-imposed exile. That she punished herself more severely than any court could. And that when the moment came to hide or to help, she chose to help. That speaks to her character. That speaks to whether she deserves mercy. The judge allowed it. On the 3rd day of the trial, the prosecution called David to the stand. Sarah's former brother-in-law. The man who'd confronted her in the hospital. Mr. Mitchell, Bradshaw said. You lost your brother in the Alaska crash, correct? Yes. And your niece, Emma, age 8. Yes. David's voice was tight. And you were told that Sarah Mitchell had also died in the crash. That's what I believed. How did it feel when you learned she was alive? David was quiet for a long moment. Sarah couldn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the table. It felt like she'd died twice, David said finally. Once in Alaska, and again when she chose not to come back. Bradshaw nodded. No further questions. Chen stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Mitchell, have you seen the video of the landing on Highway 6? Yes. In your opinion, as someone who knew Sarah Mitchell before the Alaska crash, before she lost Emma, would you say the woman who landed that plane was the same person? Objection, Bradshaw said. Calls for speculation. I'll allow it, the judge said. David looked at Sarah for the first time since taking the stand. Really looked at her. No, he said softly. The Sarah I knew before the crash was fearless. Confident, full of life. The woman on that plane was broken. You could hear it in her voice on the recordings. Every word sounded like it cost her something. But she did it anyway. She saved all those people even though it cost her everything to do it. Even though it cost her the anonymity she'd built over 7 years. Yes. Knowing that coming out of hiding would lead to this trial. To possible prison time. Yes. That sounds like someone who's already paid a price, doesn't it? Objection. Withdrawn. Chen sat down. No further questions. On the final day, Sarah took the stand. Bradshaw came at her hard. Did you or did you not fake your death? I didn't fake anything, Sarah said quietly. I survived a crash. I was found barely alive. When I recovered, I chose to start over. That's not faking death. That's choosing not to correct an assumption. You knew people believed you were dead. Yes. And you let them keep believing it. Yes. Why? Sarah looked at the jury. At the judge. At the crowd of passengers who'd come to support her. Because Sarah Mitchell was the mother who let her daughter freeze to death in her arms, she said. Her voice was steady but her eyes were wet. Sarah Mitchell was the pilot who made the decisions that killed her family. Sarah Mitchell was broken. Destroyed. Every time someone looked at me with pity, every time someone said, "I'm sorry for your loss," it was like losing Emma all over again. So I became someone else. Jane Summers. A nurse, someone who saved lives instead of losing them. Did it work? Bradshaw asked. Did being Jane Summers make you feel better? No, Sarah said simply. Nothing made me feel better. I think about Emma every day. I dream about the crash every night. I still feel the cold. I still hear her asking me if I'll fly again. Being Jane didn't erase that. It just made it easier to breathe. And now? Now the whole world knows who I am. Jane is gone. Sarah is back. And I have to live with that. Do you regret coming out of hiding to help those passengers? Sarah looked at the passengers in the courtroom. Saw their faces. Saw children who would have been orphans. Parents who would have been mourned, lives that would have ended. No, she said. I don't regret it. If I could go back, I'd do it again. Those 312 people deserved a chance. I gave them that. Whatever happens to me now, I can live with it. Even if you go to prison. Even then. Bradshaw sat down. Chen had no questions. What else was there to say? The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the four women stood. On the charge of identity fraud, we find the defendant, not guilty. Sarah's knees went weak. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant, not guilty. Chen grabbed her arm to steady her. The four women continued through each charge. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. When it was done, the courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. But then he did something unexpected. He asked Sarah to remain standing. Captain Mitchell, Judge Raymond Harris said. His voice was grave. This jury has found you not guilty of the criminal charges brought against you. But I want to say something for the record. Sarah stood, bracing herself. What you did, disappearing for 7 years, was wrong. It caused pain to people who cared about you. It violated the trust of your community and your service. You should not have done it. Sarah nodded. I know, Your Honor. But, the judge continued, I have reviewed your service record. I have read the testimony of the 312 people you saved. And I have listened to your explanation of the unbearable grief that drove you to hide. While I cannot condone your actions, I understand them. And I believe that your 7 years of self-imposed exile, living under a false identity, running from your past, denying yourself the closure of mourning properly, was punishment enough. This court will not add to that burden. He paused. Looked at her with something like compassion. You're free to go, Captain Mitchell. My only recommendation is that you find a way to forgive yourself. Your daughter would want that. Sarah couldn't speak. Could only nod. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Passengers from United 1547 formed a human shield around her, guiding her to a waiting car. Chen had arranged for her to stay at a safe house until the media frenzy died down. But before she got in the car, Sarah stopped. Turned to face the cameras. I have a statement, she said. The crowd went silent. My name is Sarah Mitchell. 7 years ago, I lost my daughter Emma in a plane crash in Alaska. I couldn't cope with that loss, so I ran. I became someone else. I was wrong to do that. I caused pain to people who deserved better from me. I'm sorry. She took a breath. 3 weeks ago, I was on United Flight 1547 when both engines failed. I had a choice. Stay hidden or try to help. I chose to help. Not because I'm brave. Not because I'm a hero. But because I made a promise to my daughter 7 years ago that I would fly again, and I'd been breaking that promise every day since. So I flew. And 312 people lived. I didn't do it for them. I did it for Emma. Everything I do now, I do for her. A reporter shouted a question, "Will you fly again?" Sarah looked up at the sky. Clear blue. No clouds. The kind of day Emma would have loved. "Yes," she said. "I'll fly again." 6 months later, Sarah stood at the entrance to Mountain View Memorial Cemetery for the first time in 7 years. She'd driven past it dozens of times during her years as Jane Summers. But she'd never gone in. Couldn't make herself walk through those gates. Couldn't face the small headstone with Emma's name on it. Now, she forced herself forward. The grave was in the children's section, under a young oak tree. The headstone was simple, Emma Grace Mitchell. Beloved daughter, gone too soon. Sarah knelt in the grass. Her legs felt weak. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "It's Mommy." The words caught in her throat. For 7 years, she'd been talking to Emma in her head. But this was different. This was real. This was Emma's actual resting place. "I'm sorry I didn't come before. I was scared. Scared that if I came here, it would make it real, like if I never saw your grave, maybe you weren't really gone." Sarah reached out, traced Emma's name carved in the stone. "But you are gone, aren't you? You've been gone for 7 years and I've been running from it the whole time. Running from you, from myself, from everyone who loved you." Tears streamed down her face. "I flew again, Emma. Just like you asked me to. I saved a whole plane full of people. I did it for you, baby. Every decision I made in that cockpit, I made thinking of you. Asking myself what you would want me to do." She pulled something from her jacket pocket. Her old Air Force wings. The ones she'd worn on her uniform for 10 years. The ones she'd packed away after the crash and never touched again. "I want you to have these," Sarah said, placing the wings at the base of the headstone. "Because you were always flying with me, every mission, every training flight. Every time I went up, I was doing it for you. To make you proud. To show you that your mom was brave and strong and capable." She sobbed. "I wasn't strong enough to save you, Emma. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I held you and I tried to keep you warm and I begged you to stay and you died anyway. And I've hated myself for it every single day since." The wind rustled the leaves above her. A bird sang somewhere in the distance. "But you asked me to fly again," Sarah continued. "And I did. And maybe that means something. Maybe that means I get to keep living. Keep breathing. Keep being your mom, even though you're not here." She heard footsteps behind her. Turned to see Jessica standing there, hands in her pockets, respectful distance away. "I hoped I'd find you here," Jessica said softly. "How'd you know I'd come?" "Because it's been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since you came back to the world. I figured you'd need to come here eventually." Sarah turned back to the grave. "I abandoned you too. Disappeared without saying goodbye. You deserved better." Jessica came closer, knelt beside her. "I was angry for a long time. Felt betrayed. But then I watched that cockpit voice recording from United 1547. Heard your voice, heard the pain in it, the fear, the determination. And I realized you'd been fighting this battle alone for 7 years. Maybe if I'd tried harder to reach you after the crash. This wasn't your fault, Jess. And it wasn't yours either. The Alaska crash. Emma. None of it was your fault. Sarah shook her head. I was the pilot. And pilots can't control bird strikes or engine failures or mechanical malfunctions. You know that. You teach that. Why can't you apply it to yourself? Sarah didn't have an answer. Jessica stood up, held out a hand. Come on. There's someone who wants to meet you. Sarah let Jessica pull her to her feet. They walked through the cemetery to the parking lot where a car was waiting. A young woman got out. Maybe 25, flight suit. Second Lieutenant Bars. Captain Mitchell, the woman said, saluting. Lieutenant Kara Dennings. It's an honor. Sarah returned the salute awkwardly. She wasn't active duty anymore. Wasn't sure she deserved the respect. Lieutenant Dennings is a new pilot, Jessica explained. Just got her wings. She's been asking to meet you. Why? Sarah asked. Kara looked nervous but determined. Because you're the reason I wanted to fly, ma'am. I was on United 1547. Seat 18B. I was headed home from college. When those engines failed, I thought I was dead. Then you stood up. Took control, saved all of us. Sarah remembered. 312 faces. She tried not to look at them during the crisis. Couldn't afford to think of them as people. But she remembered a young woman in 18B. Remembered her crying when they landed. You saved my life, Kara continued. And when I found out who you were, what you'd been through, I realized that heroes aren't people who never fall. They're people who fall and get back up. So I applied to the Air Force. Made it through flight training. And now I'm a pilot because you showed me what courage really looks like. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking. Opening. I'm not a hero, she said quietly. Yes, you are. You just don't see it yet. Jessica put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. The Air Force wants you back. Not active duty, you've been gone too long for that. But as an instructor, teaching emergency procedures. Sharing what you know. Making sure the next generation of pilots knows how to handle the impossible. I don't know if I can. You can, Jessica said firmly. You already did. United 1547 was your qualification test. You passed with 312 lives saved. Now it's time to teach others how to do the same. Sarah looked at Kara. Saw the hope in her eyes. The belief that Sarah was something more than a broken woman who'd run from her grief. Maybe she could be. Maybe Emma would want her to be. Okay, Sarah whispered. I'll try. 1 year later. Sarah stood in front of a classroom full of student pilots. 23 young men and women who'd made it through basic flight training and were now learning advanced procedures. Emergency protocols. What to do when everything goes wrong. I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell, she began. My call sign is Survivor. And I'm going to tell you about the worst crash of my life. About how I survived by not surviving. The students leaned forward. They knew who she was. They'd all seen the videos. But hearing it from her directly was different. 7 years ago, I was flying a bush plane in Alaska with my husband and 8-year-old daughter, Sarah said. Her voice was steady. She'd practiced this. The engine failed. We crashed. My husband died on impact. My daughter died 3 days later from hypothermia while I held her. I survived. The classroom was silent. The rescue team found me barely alive. They assumed I wouldn't make it. When I did, when I walked out of that hospital, I made a choice. I let the world think I'd died too. I took a new name. New identity, became someone else. I didn't fly for 7 years. She paused. Then I was on United Flight 1547 when both engines failed from a bird strike. The pilots couldn't reach any airport. 312 people were going to die. And I had to choose, stay hidden in my grief and shame, or use my training to try to save them. You saved them, one student said. I did, Sarah agreed. I glided that dead aircraft 89 miles and landed it on a highway. Everyone lived. But that's not the lesson I want you to take from this. She walked to the window, looked out at the runway where training aircraft were taking off and landing. The lesson is this: you will face emergencies in your flying career. That's not a possibility, it's a certainty. And in those moments, you will have to make decisions with incomplete information, limited resources, and lives depending on you. The training will kick in. The procedures will help. But ultimately, you'll have to find something inside yourself that can handle the impossible. She turned back to the class. For me, that something was my daughter. Emma asked me with her dying breath if I would fly again. I promised her I would. I broke that promise for 7 years. When United 1547 needed me, I kept it. Not because I was brave. Not because I wanted to. But because I'd made a promise to someone I loved, and that promise was stronger than my fear. What if we don't have that? A student asked. What if we don't have someone we made a promise to? Then you make the promise to yourself, Sarah said. You promise that when the emergency comes, you won't panic. You won't freeze. You'll remember your training. You'll use every skill you have. You'll fight for every second of flight time, every foot of altitude, every possible option. And you won't give up. Another student raised her hand. Why is your call sign Survivor if you're the only one who came back? Sarah had been waiting for this question. It was the one everyone asked eventually. Because I carry them with me, she said simply. My husband Jake and my daughter Emma, every person who was on that Alaska flight that I couldn't save. They're with me every time I fly now. Every time I teach. Every time I share what I learned from losing them. Survivor doesn't mean I made it out alone. It means I made it out carrying everyone who didn't. The students were quiet, absorbing this. I'm going to push you hard in this course, Sarah continued. I'm going to throw scenarios at you that seem impossible. Engine failures at low altitude, multiple system failures, weather emergencies. And I'm going to expect you to solve them. Not because I'm cruel, but because someday, one of you will face a real emergency. And when you do, I want you to hear my voice in your head saying, you can do this. You've trained for this. You're not alone. She pulled up a simulation on the classroom screen. Okay, first scenario. You're at 10,000 feet, single-engine aircraft, and your engine quits. Nearest airport is 12 miles away. What's your first action? A young man in the front row raised his hand. Establish best glide speed. Good. And after that? Find a landing spot. Field, road, anything flat. Better. But you forgot something crucial. What did you forget? Silence. You forgot to breathe, Sarah said. In an emergency, your body's first instinct is panic. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing gets shallow. Your vision tunnels. You have to fight that. Force yourself to take a breath. Then another. Then think. Then act. Panic will kill you faster than any mechanical failure. She spent the next 2 hours walking them through scenarios. Some they solved. Some they didn't. With each failure, she explained what they'd missed. What they should have seen. How they could do better. By the end of class, the students looked exhausted but energized. As they filed out, Kara Dennings hung back. She was in the class now, 1 year into her training. That was intense, Kara said. It'll get more intense, Sarah promised. Next week we're doing water ditching scenarios. Can't wait. Kara hesitated. How are you doing? Really? Sarah considered the question. A year ago, she would have said she was broken. 6 months ago, she would have said she was surviving. Now. I'm flying again, Sarah said. Not in an aircraft. But in life. I'm teaching. I'm helping. I'm honoring Emma's memory by making sure other pilots are ready when their emergency comes. Do you still think about her every day? Every hour, Sarah admitted. But it's different now. Before, thinking about Emma was just pain. Now it's pain and purpose. She asked me to fly again. I'm flying. She wanted me to help people. I'm helping. The grief hasn't gone away, but it's become something I can carry instead of something that crushes me. Kara nodded. I saw you at the cemetery last week. You were putting flowers on her grave. Sarah smiled. It was small and sad but real. I go every week now. Talk to her. Tell her about the students. About the people I'm training. About how I'm keeping my promise. I think that's beautiful. It's necessary, Sarah corrected. Emma's death broke me. But her last words gave me a path forward. Will you fly again, Mommy? Every time I step into this classroom, every time I teach emergency procedures, every time I help a student solve an impossible scenario, I'm answering that question. Yes, Emma. Yes, I'm flying again. Jessica walked into the classroom then, carrying a folder. Got your next assignment, she said to Sarah. Pentagon wants you to testify before Congress. They're holding hearings on cockpit emergency protocols. They want you to share the United 1547 experience. Sarah's stomach clenched. Public speaking, cameras, questions about Emma, about her disappearance. About everything she'd been trying to process privately. But she nodded. When? 2 weeks. I can go with you if you want. I'd like that. Jessica handed her the folder. Inside were briefing materials. Photos from the United 1547 incident, diagrams of the flight path, statistics on dual-engine failures. And a passenger manifest. 312 names. 312 people who would have died if Sarah had stayed in her seat. If she'd kept hiding. If she'd broken her promise to Emma one more time. You saved them all, Jessica said, seeing Sarah's expression. I know. Do you believe it yet? That you're not the woman who let her daughter die? That you're the woman who saved 312 people? Sarah looked at the manifest. Saw names. Ages, addresses, lives that continued because she'd found the courage to fly again. I'm both, she said quietly. I'm the mother who couldn't save her child. And I'm the pilot who saved everyone else's children. Those things don't cancel each other out. They just exist together. Emma died. I survived. I hated myself for that for 7 years. But now I think maybe I survived for a reason. To be on that plane. To save those people. To teach these students. To honor her by living instead of hiding. Jessica pulled her into a hug. She'd be proud of you. I hope so, Sarah whispered. God, I hope so. The congressional hearing was exactly as awful as Sarah expected. Politicians asking pointed questions about her disappearance. Media dissecting every moment of the Alaska crash, experts analyzing her decisions on United 1547. But when it was her turn to speak, Sarah found her voice. Members of Congress, she began. My name is Captain Sarah Mitchell. 7 years ago, I lost my family in a plane crash. I lost myself too. I spent those 7 years hiding from my grief and my guilt. Then fate put me on United Flight 1547 when it needed a pilot. I didn't save those people because I'm special. I saved them because I've been trained. Because the Air Force taught me how to fly a dead aircraft, because somewhere in my broken mind, I remembered my daughter asking me to fly again. She paused. You asked me here to talk about emergency protocols. About what worked and what didn't. About how we can train pilots better. And I'll answer all those questions. But first, I want to say this: every commercial pilot in America is trained for emergencies. They know the procedures. They practice the scenarios. But training can only do so much. When the real emergency comes, when lives are at stake, pilots have to find something deeper. Call it courage. Call it determination. Call it refusing to give up. Whatever you call it, that's what saves lives. A senator interrupted. Captain Mitchell, some critics have suggested that your emotional state, the trauma you'd experienced, might have impaired your judgment on United 1547. How do you respond? Sarah met his eyes. Senator, my trauma made me hyper-aware of what was at stake. I knew what it felt like to lose someone I loved. I knew what it felt like to be the one left behind. I wasn't going to let 312 families feel that pain if I could prevent it. So yes, my trauma affected my judgment. It made me more determined, not less. The hearing went on for 6 hours. Sarah answered every question. Walked them through every decision she'd made in that cockpit. Explained her calculations, her reasoning, her fears. When it was over, when she finally walked out of the hearing room, passengers from United 1547 were waiting in the hall. Dozens of them, holding signs. Thank you, Captain Mitchell. 312 reasons to say thank you. Our hero. Sarah stopped. Felt her eyes fill with tears. A woman came forward. She was holding a little girl's hand. The girl was maybe 5 years old. Captain Mitchell, the woman said. I was in seat 27A. This is my daughter Lucy. She wasn't born yet when you saved us. I was 8 weeks pregnant. I didn't even know it. But because of you, she's here. She's alive. And I get to be her mother. Sarah knelt down to the little girl's level. Hi Lucy. Hi, Lucy said shyly. Then she held out a drawing. It was an airplane. And a stick figure with wings. I drew you. Sarah took the drawing. Felt something in her chest crack open. It's beautiful. Thank you. Mommy says you're an angel, Lucy said. I'm not an angel, sweetie. I'm just a pilot who did her job. Mommy says angels save people. You saved Mommy. That makes you an angel. Sarah pulled Lucy into a hug. Let herself cry. Let the grief and the joy and the overwhelming weight of being alive crash over her. When she finally let go, more passengers were coming forward. Each with a story, each with a thank you, each with a life that had continued because Sarah had kept her promise to Emma. 3 hours later, Sarah drove to the cemetery. It was late. The gates would close soon. But she needed to see Emma. The grave was as she'd left it. Flowers from her last visit. Her Air Force wings at the base of the headstone. I testified today, baby, Sarah said, sitting in the grass. Told Congress about the crash, about you, about how your last words saved 312 people. The wind rustled the oak leaves. I met a little girl named Lucy. She's 5. She's alive because I flew that plane. Her mom said I'm an angel, but you know the truth. I'm just your mom. Still missing you. Still wishing I could have saved you. But trying to honor your memory by saving everyone else I can. She traced Emma's name on the headstone. They want me to write a book. Tell the whole story. The Alaska crash. The 7 years of hiding. United 1547. The trial, everything. I don't know if I can. Putting it all down on paper makes it so permanent. So real. She took a breath. But then I think about Lucy. About those 312 people. About the student pilots I'm training. And I think maybe my story, our story, could help someone else. Some other pilot dealing with trauma, some other parent who lost a child, some other person who's hiding from unbearable pain. The sun was setting. Golden light filtered through the trees. Jessica says I should consider dating again. Can you believe that? It's been 7 years. She thinks it's time. But I still wear my wedding ring, baby. Still feel married. Still feel like your mom. I don't know how to be anything else. She pulled a photo from her pocket. It was from the congressional hearing. Showed her standing with the passengers from United 1547. All of them alive, all of them smiling. I'm going to leave this here, Sarah said, placing the photo at the base of the headstone next to her wings. So you can see what we did. What you made possible by asking me to fly again. She stood up. Wiped her eyes. I love you, Emma Grace. I'll love you forever. And I'll keep flying for both of us. Every day, every flight. Every student I train. I'm doing it for you. As she walked back to her car, Sarah felt it. A lightness she hadn't felt in 7 years. Not happiness, she wasn't sure she'd ever be truly happy again. But peace. Maybe even purpose. Emma was gone. That truth would never change. But Emma's last words, "Will you fly again, Mommy?" had become Sarah's mission. She was flying again. And she'd keep flying for as long as she had breath in her lungs and strength in her hands and memories of her daughter in her heart. Sarah stood at the front of a classroom of advanced students. But this wasn't her usual course. This was different. This was a voluntary seminar. Open to any pilot who'd experienced trauma. Who'd been in a crash. Who'd lost someone. Who was struggling with the psychological weight of flying. 20 pilots had signed up. Men and women from different branches, different backgrounds, different traumas. But all of them survivors, all of them carrying wreckage inside. My name is Captain Sarah Mitchell, she began. My call sign is Survivor. And this is a safe space. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're carrying, you're not alone. She saw relief on their faces. Recognition. These were her people. I lost my daughter 7 years ago, Sarah continued. She died in my arms after a plane crash. I blamed myself. I hid from the world. I broke my promise to fly again. Then circumstances forced me back into a cockpit, and I had to choose, stay broken or save 312 lives. A pilot in the back raised his hand. How did you choose? I heard my daughter's voice, Sarah said simply. Her last words. Will you fly again, Mommy? In that moment, keeping my promise to her mattered more than my fear, more than my guilt, more than my pain. What if we don't have that? A woman asked. What if there's no voice to hold on to? Then you hold on to this, Sarah said. You survived. Whatever happened to you, whatever crash, whatever loss, whatever trauma, you survived it. And survival means you have a choice. You can let the trauma define you. Or you can define yourself by what you do next. She spent the next 3 hours sharing her story. Answering questions, listening to their stories. A pilot who'd crashed and lost his co-pilot. A flight surgeon who'd pulled bodies from wreckage. A search and rescue specialist who had PTSD from the things she'd seen. Each one carrying their own version of Emma, their own impossible loss, their own broken promise. The call sign Survivor doesn't mean I made it out clean, Sarah told them at the end. It means I made it out carrying everyone who didn't. My husband and my daughter. The 312 people on United 1547 who could have died. I carry them with me. In here. She touched her chest. And instead of crushing me, they lift me up. They remind me why I fly. Who I fly for. Is it enough? Someone asked. Carrying them? Does it make the pain go away? No, Sarah said honestly. The pain never goes away. It just transforms. Becomes something you can live with. Something that has meaning. My daughter died, and nothing will ever make that okay. But her death led to 312 people living. That doesn't balance the scales, nothing could, but it gives her death a legacy. A purpose. After class, a young pilot approached Sarah. He was maybe 23. Fresh-faced, scared. Captain Mitchell, I crashed 6 months ago. Training accident. My instructor died. I survived. And I can't stop thinking that it should have been me. Sarah recognized that look in his eyes. She'd seen it in the mirror for 7 years. What's your name? She asked. Lieutenant Marcus Webb. Marcus, listen to me. It wasn't supposed to be you. It wasn't supposed to be your instructor either. Crashes happen. People die. Survivors are left behind. That's not fair. That's not right. But it's real. And you have a choice now. You can spend the rest of your life wishing you died too. Or you can honor your instructor by becoming the best damn pilot you can be. How do I do that? You fly. You train. You help others. You carry your instructor with you every time you go up. Make them proud. Make their death mean something by living a life that matters. Marcus nodded. That's what you did. That's what I'm trying to do, Sarah corrected. Every day. It's not easy. Some days I still want to hide. But then I remember Lucy. Remember the 312 people. Remember Emma asking me to fly. And I get up. I teach. I fly. She put a hand on his shoulder. You can do this, Marcus. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But you can. And when you're ready, I'll be here to help. He left looking steadier. Still hurting, still grieving, but not alone. Jessica found Sarah after everyone had gone. That was good, Jessica said. You're making a difference. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe I'm just sharing my damage with other damaged people. It's both. And that's okay. They walked out to the parking lot together. The sun was setting. Golden hour. Emma's favorite time of day. I'm putting in papers to adopt, Jessica said suddenly. Sarah stopped. Really? Yeah. Seeing you with those students, watching you turn your grief into purpose, it made me realize I want that. Want to be someone's person. Want to matter to someone the way Emma still matters to you. You matter to me, Sarah said. I know. But I want to matter to a kid who needs someone. Someone I can teach to fly. Someone I can share the sky with. Sarah pulled her into a hug. You're going to be an amazing mom. You still are, Jessica said. Emma's still your daughter. Death doesn't end that. They stood there in the parking lot as the sun dipped below the horizon. 2 pilots, 2 survivors, 2 women who'd faced the worst and chosen to keep flying. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from one of her students, Captain Mitchell, I want you to know your class saved my life. Not literally. But I was thinking about quitting. Giving up on flying after my crash. Your story made me realize I can't quit. I have to keep going. For the people I lost. Thank you. Sarah showed Jessica the text. See? Jessica said. You're making a difference. Emma's making a difference, Sarah corrected. I'm just the messenger. Then be the best messenger you can be. Sarah looked up at the darkening sky. Saw stars beginning to emerge. Somewhere up there, she liked to think Emma was watching. Proud of her mom for finally keeping her promise. I will, Sarah said. I'll fly for both of us. Forever. And she meant it.